1 year ago, the Middle East watched something historic. Bashar al-Assad, the brutal tyrant of Syria, fell. The man who rained down chemical weapons on his own people, the man who murdered, tortured, and ruled through fear for over 2 decades, is now gone. And now, Syrians are celebrating in the streets, holding new flags, chanting slogans of hope and victory. Damascus is filled with fireworks and music. But behind the noise, behind the smiling faces, one question remains. What really changed? Because Syria may have a new ruler, but he's not a stranger to war, extremism, or violence. And the road ahead is full of risk for Syria, for the region, and yes, for Israel as well. And by the way, Prime Minister Netanyahu is headed to the United States at the end of this month, where he will meet President Trump. I'm sure that he's going to discuss the potential of peace with Syria. What are the implications? Iran, Lebanon, and a lot more. Shalom from Israel. I'm Hanania Naftali with the latest update from the Middle East. Let's talk about the man of the hour, Ahmed al-Sharaa, or as he was previously known, Abu Muhammad al-Julani. You may remember him as the former leader of Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, the Islamist rebel group that held power in parts of Italy. Before that, he was part of Jabhat al-Nusra, an offshoot of al-Qaeda. But before we continue, if you want to visit Israel, you now have a chance. May 2026. I am bringing a tour group to Israel. You're going to visit Israel with me. It has limited seats. See the link in the description for more details. Yes, Syria's new president was once a leading jihadist. And now, he's being welcomed by world leaders, appearing in press conferences with Western diplomats and shaking hands with former enemies. I mean, just think how crazy it is that we see these videos of him playing basketball with U.S. officers in the U.S. Army. I mean, it's just crazy that a few years ago, there was millions of dollars of bounty on his head placed by the United States. And then today, fast forward to today, he's playing basketball with his sworn enemies, I guess. But look, Syria's problems didn't begin or end with Assad. Assad's departure ended an era of oppression. Yes, his regime collapsed under the weight of its own corruption, war crimes, and isolation. But replacing a dictator with someone whose hands are stained from a different kind of violence doesn't really guarantee peace. And with that being said, we also need to talk about what really caused Assad's regime to finally collapse. That's a big debate that's taking place. And this wasn't just a battlefield victory. It was a collapse of confidence from inside and outside. For years, Assad survived on the backs of Iranian weapons, Hezbollah fighters, and Russian air power. But by late 2024, something changed. Israel neutralized Hezbollah's top leadership, including its terror chief, Hassan Nasrallah. We all remember the Beeper operation, where Israel simultaneously detonated 3,000 of these pagers. And look, this wasn't done to reshape Syria. It was done to protect Israel, to eliminate a direct threat, and to uphold our God-given right to defend our people. But this moment, this shift in power sent shockwaves through Assad's support network. I mean, after Israel eliminated Hassan Nasrallah, because without Hezbollah, under pressure from Israel, Iran began to pull out of Syria entirely. Tehran ordered a full withdrawal of its revolutionary guards. I mean, and again, just to think how crazy it is that Iran used Syria as a military base from which they wanted to launch attacks on Israel. And look, Assad was left exposed. His military crumbled, his loyalists abandoned him, and he was forced to flee. And now he lives in Russia, possibly Moscow. I don't know if Putin is actually happy to have him there. He probably had to do something, because then he would look really bad in front of his other allies, which I think he kind of now stabbing Maduro in Venezuela in the back, as also he did with Iran when Israel attacked them. So I'm not sure what his strategy is about. But look, while the rebels delivered the final blow that led to Assad's final fall, Israel's strength helped clear the way for it to happen. Israel never started Syria's war. But when Assad turned his country into a battlefield, when Iranian militias moved toward our borders, we acted. We hit weapons convoys. We struck terror cells. We protected Israeli communities from missile attacks. We did what any moral country would do. And as a result, the architecture propping up Assad's regime began to fall apart. And fast forward to today. Now we're looking at the present. Let's look at what's happening today. Syria today is being governed by a man who claims to be building a new Syria. President al-Sharaa says he wants a nation that's inclusive, just, and united. He says the war is over and that finally the peace is possible. Sounds great, right? On paper. His government actually reached out to Washington, to Gulf states, and to Turkey. Most Western sanctions have been lifted from Syria, possibly to give them a new chance at life. Refugees are returning, and many are saying that Syria is finally back. But let's look at the hard truth. The country is still deeply divided. The Kurds in the northeast refuse to recognize Damascus. The Druze in the south want autonomy and have formed their own militias. Some Druze leaders actually called for Israel. They want to be under Israel's sovereignty and not Syrian sovereignty because they feel more safe with Israel than with the Syrians. The Alawites, Assad's old power base, fear for their future and are now bracing for revenge attacks. And the Islamic State cells are re-emerging in parts of the country, already launching attacks in recent weeks. So while the surface looks calm, the foundations are still cracked. And look, we also need to talk honestly about al-Sharaa. This man is not some Western educated reformer. He didn't grow up dreaming of democracy. He built his empire in the rubble of Syria's civil war, rising through the ranks of Islamist militant groups. He broke, it's true that he broke with al-Qaeda and he turned against ISIS, but those shifts came only after he tasted power, not before. The question is not whether he has changed, because clearly it looks like he has, but the question is why? Does he truly want peace? Did he change, but did his mission also change? That's the question. Because, you know, it's either he really wants peace and to make Syria great again, or he's simply consolidating power under a different flag. But the same old mission exists. So we don't know that. We can't really trust him. And we also can't ignore what he is already doing. al-Sharaa is publicly demanding that Israel withdraw from all buffer zones in southern Syria. He's calling Israeli airstrikes massacres, attacks on terrorists, right? He's calling them massacres and framing Israel as the obstacle to peace. I wonder why he didn't call the attacks on the Syrian Druze, Christians, or Alawites a massacre too. He's urging international pressure to force Israel to retreat from areas we now secure for our safety. It almost sounds like he passed the United Nations crash course for being a leader embraced by international forums. I mean, the trick is easy. You just trash Israel and your popularity will rise. That doesn't sound like a leader focused on peace. And look, Trump asked him several times to move towards normalization with Israel. I think that that's maybe why Trump invited him to the White House and met him just recently, and perhaps keeping in contact because he wants to influence Syria to become more friendly to the West rather than to China, Russia, and Iran. But al-Sharaa keeps giving you excuses. And look, I understand that maybe he needs time to rebuild Syria, to unite the people, hopefully for a good cause. But he's off to a bad start if we see him trashing Israel, the most powerful neighbor of Syria, by the way. And now, I also want to talk to you about Israel's current position. Because since Assad's fall, the IDF has increased operations inside Syria. Not to conquer, but to prevent another Iranian foothold from forming or any other terror cell. We've acted with clarity and with restraint. Just 2 weeks ago, we conducted an operation in Beijing, in Syria, targeting terror cells that actually prepared to attack Israel, which also sounds really crazy. I mean, you have people that live in neighboring countries, then instead of thinking how to build their own future or, how to live their lives, they're just thinking how to destroy our future or to destroy other lives. So there was an imminent intelligence. Israel operated and stopped it. It wasn't popular. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. Look, our security is not up for debate, not in the Knesset, not in the UN, and definitely not in Damascus. The world needs to understand, peace with Syria will only come when Israel is respected as a sovereign nation with the right to defend itself. And that includes, first of all, retaining control of Golan Heights. That's a big debate within Syria. They say that the only chance for peace with Israel is if they give us the Golan Heights. Now, that's funny because our memory is not short. And we remember how it was the Syrians that invaded Israel, the Syrians that attacked us, our farmers, our fishermen, our communities in kibbutzim in the north. So they invaded us first. Then they lost the war. They lost the Golan Heights and other lands that they occupied. So then they said, hey, so we couldn't defeat Israel, and they took the Golan Heights and they took other lands that we sat on. So now let's try to defeat them internationally using the international community, since we couldn't defeat them militarily. So that's point number one. Point number two is maintaining the militarized buffer zones. And point number three is demanding accountability from any Syrian government that supports or tolerates terrorism. Any future deal must be based on these non-negotiables. Because we've already learned what happens when terror is allowed to fester on our borders. Look, Assad did it for years with Iranian help. So we will not tolerate anything like that again, not under any new flag or any new president. So now the question is, what happens next? And that really depends on the choices made in Damascus, because Israel has extended its hand for peace, for talks. And look, if this al-Sharaa guy is serious about rebuilding Syria, then he must first of all stop using Israel as a scapegoat, purge jihadist elements from his own security forces, recognize the sovereignty of neighboring nations, including Israel, guarantee the rights of minorities inside Syria, including Druze, Christians, and Kurds. And if he fails to do that, then Syria will slide back into civil war, unfortunately. And look, once again, at the end of the day, it's the innocent that will pay the price. So to conclude, here's my final thought. Assad's fall was, of course, a turning point, but it's not the end of the story, because Syria has a chance to become a country that its people can be proud of. But that chance will die the moment it repeats the sins of the past, whether through dictatorships or religious extremism. And for Israel, we're watching carefully. We want peace. Look, we always have, but we will never sacrifice security on the altar of empty promises. And look, I believe in strength through truth. And the truth is simple. A free Syria cannot be built on lies. And a lasting peace cannot be made with those who refuse to recognize the only democracy in the Middle East. And on that note, I have to say, in this world of censorship and suppressing true news, I want to invite you, if you want to get more of these truths, more news updates, real updates. So I invite you to make sure that you are subscribed to my YouTube channel. And now, if you also want to push back against the anti-Israel lies and trends, then go visit theisraelstore.com and wear your support with pride. I'm Hanan Naftali. Until the next time, shalom from Israel.